I am beyond thrilled to have the editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer, here with me today on Under the Ring Pro Wrestling Conversations. Dave, I am so happy you're joining me today.
Oh, hey, it's really good to talk to you, Phil. I mean, it's like, I've been hearing from you for so long. And, you sent me an article on my mom, when she passed away, which was because I grew up in Poughkeepsie, where you live, or Wappingers Falls, actually.
Yeah, just in that area yesterday for having lunch with somebody. But I've been a subscriber, to you and to what you're doing, WrestlingObserver.com, F4W online for many years. So I can't endorse it enough as kind of the journalism, the top of the business of what you do. But reason I invited you on for this episode was just, it's the future of Vince McMahon. It's the future of WWE and the future of the wrestling industry, all kind of changing in the last few weeks. So
it's been a seismic shift.
It really has.
And the future of wrestling, my thoughts of the future of wrestling have changed greatly. Everything is just very different. And we'll have to see how it all plays out. But I think that AEW has got a much bigger challenge than it had 2 months ago. And WWE, it's, so far so good. But I mean, WWE is going to survive no matter what. And I think AEW will as well. But the dynamics of who's hot and who's not, and so many different things have changed.
Yeah. Well, we'll start with what kind of impacts can and will Vince McMahon's departure have on WWE's business itself? It seems like WWE is relatively idiot-proof financially, just based on all the deals that they made. But
completely idiot-proof, yeah.
What impacts can and will his departure have on WWE business-wise?
And I mean, not much. I think that, it may get a little bit hotter, or I suppose it could even get colder, in down the line. But the point is those would be very minimal, because the money that comes in is going to be the guaranteed money from television, and that, the guaranteed money from Peacock, the international deals, and those numbers are already on the books. I mean, the live attendance can shift a little bit up and down, maybe even a lot, but the nature of the business, it's not a live attendance a business anymore. It's a television content business, and the content money is guaranteed. In the long run, yes, it can get bigger with the next deal, but it was going to anyway under Vince. I mean, wrestling has become more and more important in the cable world because so many shows have declined so greatly, and wrestling gives you 52 weeks of a very steady audience, which is worth, it's funny, the wrestling audience is worth far more now than it was, 22 years ago, 24 years ago, when wrestling was so much more popular mainstream. I mean, it's just, people look at the numbers and go, oh, it's so low compared to whatever, but everything is. But I mean, we're talking like this week alone, I mean, Raw was the number 2 show on cable, and AEW Dynamite was number 5 on cable. SmackDown dominated its night on Friday night, a lot of reruns and everything, but still dominated the night. And, that's, wrestling is doing really well, and its value to television is very strong. I mean, there's a million different things in play, but for NBC, Universal, and Fox, the shows are a big success, and are going to be more valuable when the rights come due. So for WWE, nothing's going to go down without Vince. I mean, that's that stuff. The deals Nick Khan made have transformed that company.
Now that Vince McMahon is facing allegations of misconduct, how important is it for WWE to change the culture and maintain transparency with the talent and with the shareholders?
Well, it's very important. I mean, it's weird because it's like a company that, originally I remember when they would have the stock meet, the stockholders things, they're so detailed and you could really learn the business. But of course the business changed. So it's not as important, a lot of the different categories as they once were, because the main category is guaranteed money. But so financially they were always they were pretty out, pretty out there. But behind the scenes, it's the wrestling culture. And as long as you have people from that old wrestling culture, that is their mentality on the world. So that was going to be different, and that does have to change as a public company. And in 2022, Vince was still behaving like it was 1986, and that's what did him in.
Yeah. What were the most important things that he was bringing to the table day to day in WWE? Like now,
Vince?
Vince McMahon, yeah. I got to stop using pronouns.
Yeah. I mean, okay, there's inherent experience in being around for so long and seeing everything and seeing so much of what happened, which works for you and also works against you because you, a lot of this stuff you learned in the 70s and 80s and is not, things have changed, but the period of where you grew and learn, it's like, what you grew and learned, things have changed. So there was a positive and a negative. I mean, the thing is he'd been through every dealing with talent that there's been probably at some form or another. So he kind of knows how to handle talent really well. I mean, that was the old Jedi mind trick thing. I mean, he was really good at getting talent to do what he wanted him to do. So that, that was his strength, and just the aura of being Vince McMahon was a strength because he'd been there for so long and he was God of professional wrestling and to a lot of people. But the reality is that I think it's better off without him. I think that we're going to find that out just because, and this was going to happen anyway, because he was 76 and how much longer could he go in that position?
You were watching wrestling before Vince McMahon ran WWE, and I knew the story from following it over the years, but seeing it all written out in your most recent edition of The Observer was just amazing to see all the different steps to where he got everything to. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Is it possible because of the infrastructure that's already there that this company actually grows even bigger than it is now?
I expect that it will. Yes, I expect that it will. I think that we're going to have a little bit more popularity just because it's going to be new enough and they're really looking at the future. I mean, there's just a lot of things looking at the future. So I expect it will grow. I expect the TV deals to grow. So yeah, I think that it will be more popular. I think this move, it wouldn't have happened without the scandal and everything, but I think this move is a positive, just because I think that they needed a change. And I think it's a negative for AEW because I think AEW took advantage of the fact that their competitor was run by Vince McMahon, who had a very narrow view of what talent could get over. So a lot of talent, kind of knew that we can't go to WWE, so AEW is our place. And that really became the foothold of the growth of AEW.
And maybe AEW needs to kind of redefine itself now, because before it seemed like, okay, this is an alternative. This is an alternative to sports entertainment. And now you have potentially people with relatively similar views on what pro wrestling is and should look like in the opposite chairs now. So
yeah, that's going to be the big challenge. AEW now has better wrestling matches, and that's a plus. But that's, wrestling popularity has never been about bell-to-bell wrestling matches, although it is more important now than it's ever moved before. But it's never been the be-all and end-all. There are many companies in wrestling wars where the smaller company had better wrestling matches and they were still remained the smaller company. The AEW thing is they have to battle this company that's been around forever and is part of culture. And the fact that they've come as far as they have is absolutely amazing when you really look at it. But a lot of it was taking advantages of the, I don't want to say weaknesses, but of the mentality of Vince McMahon and providing an alternative. And now, yeah, the other company is going to be doing something more similar to what you're doing, and they're bigger and they're better known and they've got the bigger arenas and the better production. And it's going to be, and a lot of your talent that didn't want to go there, if the money's better there, they have an advantage there because you're talking about a $1.1 billion company versus maybe $100 million company. So they have a lot more money to pay talent. So it's going to be a big challenge for Tony Khan. Without a doubt.
This wasn't in my notes previously, but I'm thinking like the whatever the next deal they have is, and even if it's with Discovery, with Warner, like that corporate synergy is going to be the key to them taking the next step. Like just who's behind them and how much.
Absolutely. That's the biggest story. The two big stories to look out for. The Vince McMahon leaving is the biggest story of years and years and years, 15 years, since the Benoit thing. The next two big stories, well, the other big story was the formation of AEW. The next two big stories to watch are potential sale of WWE, which a lot of people think is with Vince out of the picture is more likely than before. And I thought it always was likely at some point. And then also the television rights deal that AEW picks up when this current contract is up. And, after the last week of reading about Warner Brothers Discovery and all their cost cutting, it looked like the AEW timing looks terrible. But, you know, there's other things going on behind the scenes that are positive. And, you know, the fact that they were number 5 for the week in cable this week. And so that's a good thing. So there's pluses and minuses. I mean, what they make is so is so ridiculously low compared to the ratings they deliver. So hopefully that will change. But also, you know, the other thing is that will other people be interested and raise that, raise that price, you know, with multiple bidders? Are there, you know, you would think that there would be a lot of interest in a show, in a series of shows and a product that's doing as well as AEW is doing. But, you know, everybody's, you know, money's tight in a lot of places. You know, and the other one with Warner Brothers Discovery is like, they're going to pay the NBA, you know what I mean? And the NBA number is going to go up. And so it's like, while they're doing cost cutting, they're going to pay the NBA. So time will tell, but that's a giant story. Yes.
And the NHL did surprisingly well. I'm a big hockey fan, but I thought the Stanley Cup playoffs pulled much better numbers than I would have expected.
I thought so too. I thought that hockey had, especially during the season, it was a little up, but like when in the postseason, they did really well this year. And so that's also a valuable property that they just got. So, you know, with those valuable properties, well, AEW is also valuable. They're not, you know, NHL and NBA are always going to be priorities over them.
Yeah. Do you really think they're going to sell? People have asked me that so many times.
WWE?
Yeah.
I mean, NBC Universal should buy them. I mean, if I was,
seems like it would make sense, you know.
It makes sense to and buy them and get SmackDown back. I mean, it's unless they think that cable TV is dying and they don't want to spend money. And I don't think cable TV is changing and it is getting smaller, but I don't think it's dying. But you know, I think, I think that they'll sell. You know, I think everything that's been, you know, all the Nick Khan moves seem to be to you know, make the company ripe for a sale. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, I was watching a little bit of the Jake Paul, Triple H, Jake Paul, Logan Paul. Well, I wrote the wrong
Logan Paul and the Miz.
Triple H interview yesterday.
Oh, I didn't see that interview, but I know the interview.
Yeah, but just thinking about some of the stuff with him and Bad Bunny and McAfee and some of those opportunities, one of the things that Logan Paul was bringing up to Triple H was just ways of taking some of his digital marketing, you know, kind of thoughts and integrating them in with WWE. And Paul Levesque was just like, yes, please bring all of those ideas because this is how we, you know, this is how we grow the company, you know. So it was just I think that's the direction where they grow because they're not afraid to try those interesting things like, you know, Bad Bunny and that kind of stuff. Even if like Triple H even admitted like I didn't know who the heck Logan Paul was when it started because they asked him like what did you think about it when you first heard about this, and he's like I had absolutely no idea who he was, but my kids know who he is.
Wow. So, I mean, I knew who he was. But I knew who he was long before the boxing. But you know, I mean, I think he got a lot of fame in my world when his first boxing show did great pay-per-view numbers, and it's kind of like this makes no sense. I got to find out who this guy is.
That was the thing he was saying. Like when I can't remember the name of the person at WWE who handles the celebrities, but he said that she had come to him with that, and he's like, and I started looking up the guy, and I realized like, wait, this guy wants to do this. Okay, it sounds good to me.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah. But I know a lot of people will notice some of the terms that are back on the show and some of the words and stuff like that. But what is really the biggest difference with Vince McMahon not being there now?
It's too early to say. I mean, I think, you know, everybody saw, you know, Tommaso Ciampa got a push, you know, on Monday night. But, you know, he'll probably lose to Lashley this week. I mean, there'll be some talent and different usages of talent. But I mean, as far as big picture, it still looked like Raw to me. I mean, it was a better show than usual, but, you know, of course, you know, right now there's going to be a lot of new ideas and it's going to be better. So that's not a surprise. But, I mean, that's something that we really were going to have to look at in 6 months and see, like, is the wrestling quality going to be way better? Are they going to be, you know, I know some of the things that they're looking for, you know, I mean, they're definitely looking at expanding in a lot of ways. I mean, Triple H, you know, he wanted to, you know, when he wanted to have outposts all over the world, and then the pandemic kind of killed all that. And Nick Khan, you know, also, you know, they started solidifying and those plans were put away, but now they have so much money again and the pandemic's over. So maybe, you know, the idea of like expanding with more developmental programs makes more sense. And obviously, you know, they're just recruiting all kinds of women gymnasts. So, you know, the women will be are being, I mean, they're certainly looking for the attractive women. That's always been the cornerstone of what WWE looks for television. But we're going to have a higher quality of athlete of the women going forward based on who they're recruiting.
Yeah, one thing that struck me about the last couple of shows, TV wise, was the pacing of them and kind of the formatting. I thought that the MSG show, the way they flowed from like segment to segment to segment, kind of each segment bleeding into the next, reminded me a little bit of ECW, when Paul Heyman was booking ECW, where people were kind of, one segment was just ending as the other one was beginning, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be interesting. It seems to me that the wrestling is going to be an emphasis, whether it should be or not.
It'll be. Yeah, because Paul is a wrestler, and Paul, is I mean, Vince, you always want good wrestling, but I do think that like a lot of the matchups we made more with the idea of does A and B mesh together well, whereas before I think it was just whatever storyline we're working on, and these guys just have to mesh together, and I think that we'll have better finishes, but I don't think it's going to be all clean finishes. I think these last shows showed that. But, I mean, again, I think it's a slow, gradual process, and we're not going to really know. I think that there's going to be, I think the top people will have less scripting of their interviews, which is a good thing. Yeah. Bottom people, maybe not, but top people, I think will.
And I thought that the emphasis on the championships was the other takeaway that I really had on Monday, that they are going to establish these championships as a big piece of the storytelling now. The U.S. title, I don't think, has ever meant more than it did with a mini tournament in one night. All three matches were good, and a JBL narrated video with all sorts of historical stuff in it. So
I think that they'll use history more because he's a fan of history. So, I do think I think we'll see more emphasis on the championships and less silliness with the championships. And I think that, that's a matter of taste, but I think it's probably in 2022 a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's probably good for my taste. I don't know if that's everybody's taste. I don't know if I'm the demographic they're looking for.
Everyone's different. I mean, you're trying to cast the widest net, and nobody knows what that is. Vince thought he knew. Everyone thinks they know, and nobody knows until you put it in practice and see how it works. I mean, I thought that everybody thought that this product on NXT, they were with younger talent and all that was going to attract a younger audience, and ended up attracting a super old audience. So you never know what is going to work and what's not going to work until you do it. And then, you give it time and either it works or you learn that, hey, this is not what works.
I think a real key to the future here too is, in addition to the possibility of changes with NXT, which is probably still down the road, I'd imagine that NXT and the PC are going to work a lot better in concert with the main roster than they did before.
100%. And that was a real flaw of NXT, is you would have these people. What killed NXT, I mean, there's a lot of things that I shouldn't say killed because it's still alive, but a lot of the things that hurt NXT were that they would build up a guy on NXT as this big star, and then you go to the main roster and he would just do nothing. And it just basically told people, hey, don't invest in these guys in NXT because they're not going to get these guys that you think are big stars aren't going to get that shot. And now I think that is going to happen a lot less.
I've always kind of viewed their PC, like, I know that sometimes the knock on WWE is, they aren't creating their own stars, but you could really look at almost anybody in WWE history and figure out where they started somewhere else anyway, all the way back to Hogan, maybe even before. But
all the old stars started somewhere else. But now in the future, it's going to be a combination of people who make their names on the independents and people who they self-create in the laboratory. And more, I think that they want to use the people who they self-create because they're bigger and better looking and higher quality athletes. And that's what they want in the product long term. It'll take a while for them to catch up in the ring. But if they get a chance and get the ring time, that's the other thing they need to do, is they need to run more developmental shows, which they have started doing also. But those developmental, like, they're doing every other weekend, but they need to, I would, because of logistics and travel and everything, you can't do 2 shows a night, but I would want to do optimum 2 shows of developmental, 3 nights a week. They won't. So that way more people get more ring time, because that's what they need now is all of these great young athletes to be in the ring 3 nights a week, as opposed to 1 night a week or 1 night every other week.
And I think it's also probably important to have some of those young athletes working with some veterans too, because the only way you actually get better is working with people who are better than you. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always kind of viewed their PC as more of a finishing school than kind of a from scratch kind of thing. I know they want to create the talents, but talking in interviews I've done over the years with different people, like the one that stands out in my mind totally was when I talked to Finn Balor when he was still in NXT, and obviously he was a huge star worldwide before he even stepped foot in WWE. But he was so excited that day. He's like, when I hang up the phone with you today, I'm going to be rolling around with Johnny Saint for like an hour.
Well, that's
so they got a lot of stuff out of that, but it's more just it's more of like fine tuning than it is you're doing like the beginner's class.
Yeah. Well, you need everything. You need the whole gamut. You need stuff for beginners, and you need to be able to get those beginners up to speed. And sometimes that's worked, and sometimes it hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, like New Japan does an awesome job with their dojo system, and now they've established their US, but it's a totally different kind of dynamic because even in Japan, like work culture is even different from where you don't leave. You stay with the same company for ever and ever. And
it's also like 24/7. I mean, like you live in the dojo pretty much, or you live right by there, and you're and you're really hammered on basics. I mean, that the New Japan way of training wrestlers for bell to bell is clearly the superior way, but they are also they are great bell to bell wrestlers, but there's in the United States so much of it depends on talking ability, and you need that training too, and they're not trained in that manner like we would do here. So for WWE the training would be different, but there's certainly things to learn. I mean, it's funny because like Finlay sent his son, and Regal sent his son originally, to New Japan before they were, and Finlay's son's still with New Japan, but Regal's son is in WWE Developmental now. But they sent them there first because of the idea that they would get that better basic first round of training.
Yeah. Does AEW need to get in that game a little bit more now with the way things are going?
They can recruit from indies, and indies will always be around. I think for women, because they are behind with women in a lot of ways, I mean, ultimately long run, yes, they need to have a system like that, rather than farm it out. I mean, they got QT training people, and they got Dustin training people, so it's there, but it's interesting. I mean, Dustin's big thing is like we're teaching people heart, and we'll, it's they have a system. I mean, obviously it can be improved, but every system can be improved.
Sure. One person I wanted to bring up, and you touched on him a couple of times already, is Nick Khan. I think a lot of people don't understand totally what his importance is to WWE. A lot of people credited him with all the releases when those happened.
That was Vince. But I mean, like every big decision was Vince. But now the decisions are Nick Khan and Stephanie. That's the bottom line. That's where it ends. So if something happens, it's Nick Khan and Stephanie agreeing on what happens. So cuts are going, and the cuts decisions are going to largely be made by Stephanie and Paul, as will be the signings. Budget, they're both probably going to be working on that. But yeah, now Nick Khan really does have that power, far more than he had before. But he did have a lot of power. He was, behind Vince, he was the most powerful guy in the company. But his value is in, deal negotiations and business stuff, and he's been worth his weight in gold. I mean, the WWE deals are just tremendous. That's why they're in. If it wasn't for Nick Khan, the company would be taking a lot more of a hit stock market wise, I think, with the loss of Vince. But everybody looks and it's like these deals are in place. Their finances are not going down. So you don't have to worry about, oh my God, without Vince, it's going to go down, because it's not.
And they might have even been in a better place going into the pandemic because of those.
Oh, they're in a million times better place. If they didn't have those deals at that level, they would have been hurt very badly in the pandemic. The reality is they became far more profitable in the pandemic because giving up house shows and all that stuff was actually leading to higher profits,
right.
And then when they came out of the pandemic, people were so starved for house shows that they did well again, which, I think that because they weren't doing that great going into the pandemic. So the pandemic actually, I don't want to say benefited them, but they weren't hurt by it, financially at all.
Yeah, they seem pretty nimble, just about ways that they could adjust things that they wouldn't really have a loss to it. Why is Stephanie McMahon important, and what does she bring to the table in all of this?
Well, she's Vince's daughter. And so, she's been around the business. She's kind of learned the business for decades from Vince. So there's that. And let's face it, Vince is going to still talk to her, so Vince is going to have influence. And I think that's one of the reasons that she's there, is because he's out of the company, but in another way, his influence will still be felt. But yeah, I think there was the idea of having a McMahon in that position. Just felt, the board felt that was important. It's so weird because, she was out of the company in May, and now here she is co-CEO.
Do you think Vince McMahon will still feel compelled to contribute, at least like advisory wise, with his family in the meantime?
Yeah, I don't think he can help it, and I don't think that they can help listening to him, because that's both Paul Levesque and Stephanie. That's who they learned from. So if that guy is watching and says, "Hey, this and this is the guy who taught him." So his influence will be there, but he's not going to be the one making the final decisions. But he's going to be the one he's still going to have a great deal of influence.
As I was making notes for this too, and I kind of just bounced around all of my notes depending on where we went in the conversation here, but I was thinking too that, with the way that things are going right now, NXT, wherever it goes, and ROH, wherever it goes, could end up again competing for the same piece of the pie. Just the way that this is all going to shake out. I don't know. I don't it's
know.
It's impossible to know now, but
I don't know about ROH and what, if there's so much about ROH that's still up in the air. If they get a television deal, then things change, but then does it dilute AEW? And the reality is I think that wrestling is doing good with, Raw, SmackDown, and Dynamite are doing well. NXT is they're, it's not top 10 in its time slot, whereas the other ones usually win their time slot. So NXT is not that strong. Rampage has fallen a lot lately. So I think that the optimum is those three shows, and when you just add, like, whether it's an ROH show or something else, I think it's just going to dilute the bottom part. I don't think there's a lot of interest in the bottom part. I think that the interest is going to be in those big three TV shows. Maybe Tony can spruce up Rampage and get it back going. Maybe NXT will grow a little bit, but people, even wrestling fans, only have so many hours a day to devote to wrestling. And adding new shows now, I mean, you got Impact's around, Ring of Honor was around, but they weren't really getting any big viewership. If Ring of Honor was getting big viewership, Sinclair never would have sold it. We see the Impact numbers every week. So I don't think that there's a big market for more wrestling television. I think that the current wrestling television can do very well, though. And does.
All right, we're going to move to something we call the 3 count now. It's going to be 3 quick questions and your answers. First off, what is the best part about covering pro wrestling and editing the Wrestling Observer newsletter every week?
Learning, just learning about the business. I have to learn because I'm looking at these numbers and, but yeah, learning what works, learning what doesn't work. Learning about, as you get older, you learn more and more about life and things like that. And so, yes, that's by far the best thing.
One guy I really enjoy reading about in wrestling is Bruiser Brody, for his unique persona, his background too, being a journalist and just his
right. Aura. He was a sports reporter.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that he was like a Wrestling Observer reader early.
Yeah. And I mean, he used to get mad at me when he thought I was compromising journalism. Or whatever, like sometimes where, he said, like, your job is not to be nice to these people. Your job is to hold them accountable. Sometimes he thought I was too nice to the people and everything, which is funny because, of course, all the people thought I was way too mean to them. But he was always like, you're not supposed to be nice to them. They are not supposed to like you. You are the adversary. I always thought neither the adversary or the PR machine. You want to be the, as unbiased as you can be, but yeah, he was, he was an interesting influence on me. I wonder, that's one of the real tragedies of wrestling, is death, because, he could have ended up being a front office person. I mean, I don't know where his life would have gone. I wish there were guys like him around today, because I think that Brock is kind of the closest thing, and Brock is a great asset to the business. So, but yeah, those kind of unique personas where you kind of blur the line, that's a pretty, and he was valuable as hell in his day.
Yeah. And that was kind of where my question was going, was if what his capability to thrive in the modern era would have kind of become, just based on his such a unique skill set, knowing TV, knowing creative, knowing the physical side of it, and just a crazy background that he had too. I just love hearing about him, and the stories about him are just so fun to follow.
Yeah. It's what a again, wrestling's had a lot of tragedies, and that was definitely one of them.
Yeah. And the last question, why do people care so much about your star ratings, and what should or shouldn't people read out of them?
Okay. The star ratings should be when match is high, you should look at it and go, okay, that's a recommendation to watch the match and enjoy the match. It must be enjoyable. I don't know, I don't follow movies close enough to know what kind of stuff critics have. I mean, I take it seriously in the sense of, when I do it, I watch these matches closely and all that. I mean, but it's not like my opinion is the gospel and it's the only thing. And I never consider it like that. And, but it is, it's an attempt to be, to say, hey, this is the level of recommendation I would give to this match. Either you can learn from it or you will be entertained by it or something like that. That is kind of where, I come from with it. And, and for myself with my annual Hall of Fame voting, because your ring performance to me is a big part of your Hall of Fame candidacy. I, as a voter, take my own star ratings very seriously in my own voting. That's not to say that somebody else shouldn't take their own opinions everyone should take their own opinions of matches that they've seen seriously when voting, as opposed to just, trying to come up with box office numbers and things like that, because box office, of course, it's part of it, but that's changed so much in the last couple of years. And having great matches night after night should be a strong Hall of Fame qualification. Some people just throw that out, and I don't believe in throwing that out. So I absolutely, if Tomohiro Ishii has, near the highest number of 4-star matches in history, I take that very seriously when I cast my Hall of Fame ballot. Now, other people may go, he's not a big enough star. And, that's what the Hall of Fame is, in the sense of it's your opinion, and it's wrestling's a very debatable, more than anything else. Wrestling's a super debatable Hall of Fame because the criteria isn't, we don't have batting averages and things like that. We do have star ratings, but everyone has their own opinion of what makes for a good match and what makes for a not good match. So, but yeah, I mean, people who debate over a quarter of a star, that's ridiculous. That means we agree. It's like I hear people go, oh, you only gave this 4 3/4. Only. Do you realize anything over 4 means it's a great match? So that's kind of annoying in a sense that people don't understand. Everything over 4 is a great match, and everything from there is bonus points anyway. And if you're arguing over a quarter star or a half star on a match this week, let alone a match 30 years ago, that's not taking it the right way. That's just, I don't know how to explain that. And I never thought that would happen years ago, that, people would argue over a quarter of a star of a match. I mean, my friends and I are often a half star apart, and they think just like me, or very similar to me on the same match. So we, anything within a half star is an agreement. Anything within a full star is kind of close. If you're 3 stars away from me, then, that's an actual disagreement, and that's fine. I go to movies and, my star ratings of movies would be different from, Siskel, or something like that. But that doesn't make him invalid, and that doesn't make him somebody I can't learn from, because he knows that industry a million times better than I do. So, I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on star ratings, I guess.
Well, at least it means people care about your opinion. It's where you are in this world. But Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. I just want to plug again, WrestlingObserver.com, F4W Online, and all the great stuff that you and Brian Alvarez and the cast there are doing each and every week to just really make accountability happen in the industry of wrestling. I think it's important to cover. And I think anybody who thinks it's not important to cover is missing the point.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. And I really enjoyed this, and it was great talking to Phil, and great seeing you, and, good luck, and hopefully we can see each other and do this again.
Definitely. Thank you very much.